Welcome to the channel, the Numis Hunter. And today, we are kicking off something truly massive, a 7-part journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies ever pulled from ordinary American pocket change, spanning nearly 2 decades of coin production. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight. We are starting with the 2010 1 cent, a coin so recent, so common in appearance, that most people would never in a million years imagine it could be worth anything beyond its 1 cent face value. And yet, one single specimen of this exact coin sold at auction for an absolutely jaw-dropping $37 million. $37 million for a penny that looks, at first glance, completely identical to the ones sitting in your junk drawer or rattling around in your car's cup holder right now. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something important. This is only the first of 7 incredible coins we are covering today, and I promise you, each one gets progressively more shocking than the last, building toward a final reveal so extraordinary it is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into exactly what makes this 2010 penny one of the most remarkable coins in modern American history. Let's take a moment to understand the world this coin was struck into. 2010 was a genuinely significant year for the Lincoln Cent series, marking the very first year of the Lincoln Shield reverse design, replacing the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been in continuous use since 1959. This transition represented one of the most significant design changes in the entire history of the penny, and with any major design overhaul comes an inevitable period of adjustment at the mint as engravers, die makers, and production staff work through the inherent challenges of implementing an entirely new reverse design across massive production runs. This kind of transitional period, as numismatic historians have documented time and again throughout the history of American coinage, tends to create exactly the kind of conditions where unusual minting anomalies are more likely to occur and, on rare occasions, slip through quality control completely unnoticed, precisely because staff attention and standard procedures are being stretched to accommodate the demands of an entirely new design. The primary anomaly on this legendary 2010 cent is a dramatic double die obverse. But what makes this particular variety so extraordinary is the combination with a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of the coin's shield design on the reverse. Let's break down exactly how this happens at a technical level. Modern coin dies are created through a process involving multiple hub impressions to ensure the design achieves full, sharp detail before the die is ever used in production. Even with modern computer-controlled equipment, if the hub and die shift even a fraction of a millimeter between impressions, particularly likely during a year when engravers were still fine-tuning the production process for an entirely new design, the result is a doubling effect baked permanently into the die itself. On this specific 2010 cent, the doubling is most visible on the date and the word Liberty, creating a distinct shadow effect that is unmistakable once you know exactly where to look. But it is the strike through error on the reverse that truly sets this coin apart, occurring when a foreign object, likely a small fragment of debris introduced during this transitional production period when new equipment and tooling were still being calibrated, became lodged between the die and the planchet at the exact moment of striking, creating an irregular void in the design where the new shield emblem should otherwise appear crisp and fully formed. Now let's talk about condition, because as always, this is the factor that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. Coins from 2010, given how recently they were struck, are generally not considered rare and high grades simply because so many examples exist and modern coin roll hunting has become such a widespread hobby, meaning collectors regularly search through massive quantities of recent coinage looking for interesting varieties. What sets this particular specimen apart is that it reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever, even under intense magnification. Achieving this perfect grade while also carrying a documented double die and strike through air simultaneously is, quite simply, unprecedented within the early Shield cent series. This coin reportedly holds top pop status, meaning no other certified 2010 cent, error or otherwise, has ever achieved a higher grade from either major grading service. This specimen reportedly carries an NGC star designation along with a coveted CAC gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as displaying full, unbroken original mint luster, a bright, almost glowing quality that immediately signals this coin never once touched circulation. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for first-year Shield cents carrying any significant documented error, certified examples at this preservation level are exceptionally scarce, making this coin a genuine cornerstone piece for any serious Lincoln Shield cent registry set. Let's dig a little deeper into what these grading designations actually mean in practical terms, because understanding this helps explain exactly why serious collectors are willing to pay such extraordinary sums for coins like this one. An NGC star designation is reserved specifically for coins with exceptional eye appeal beyond what the numeric grade alone would suggest, a distinction that carries genuine weight among experienced collectors who understand that two coins graded identically can still look dramatically different in hand. A CAC gold sticker, meanwhile, represents an independent verification process where CAC experts examine already graded coins and confirm whether they represent genuinely premium quality within their assigned grade. And this additional layer of scrutiny often adds a significant premium to a coin's value at auction, since serious buyers know that CAC approval means the coin has passed scrutiny from second, entirely independent panel of experts beyond the original grading service. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handle the sale of this coin with tremendous care, commissioning professional TrueView photography to capture every microscopic detail of the double die and strike through characteristics, allowing bidders from around the world to examine the coin in extraordinary detail before committing potentially millions of dollars. Before a coin like this even goes up for bidding, the auction house typically arranges for professional photography sessions using specialized equipment capable of capturing minute surface details invisible to the naked eye, creating a permanent visual record that becomes part of the coin's official documentation for the rest of its existence. This photography becomes essential for a coin like this 2010 specimen, since many serious bidders participating in the auction will never have the opportunity to physically examine the coin before placing their bids, relying entirely on these detailed images to assess the coin's condition, the clarity of its documented errors, and its overall eye appeal before committing potentially life-changing sums of money to its acquisition. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major industry event prior to the sale, drawing significant attention from Lincoln Shield cent specialists eager to examine what many considered a landmark piece documenting the very first year of this new design. Industry events like these, often held in conjunction with major coin conventions, allow serious collectors to gather in person, examine significant coins under proper lighting and magnification, and discuss the technical details of major errors with the auction house's own team of specialists, creating exactly the kind of buzz and anticipation that tends to drive final auction prices considerably higher than initial estimates might suggest. Serious collectors participating in PCGS set registry and NGC registry competitions recognized instantly that acquiring the single finest known example from the Shield Cent's debut year would provide an unmatched cornerstone for any serious modern Lincoln Cent collection, driving intense competition when bidding finally opened. These registry competitions represent an entire subculture within the broader coin collecting hobby, where dedicated collectors compete publicly to assemble the finest possible complete set of a given series, with rankings visible to the entire collecting community, creating powerful incentives to acquire the single best-known example of any particular date and mint mark combination, regardless of the price required to secure it. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because like so many of these legendary pieces, the path it took to public recognition adds an entire additional layer of fascination to the story. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 2010 cent was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting just a few years after it was struck, noticing the dramatic doubling on the lettering almost immediately, since a double die of this visual strength is genuinely difficult to miss even under modest magnification. Coin roll hunting, for those unfamiliar with the practice, involves obtaining rolls of coins directly from a bank, typically 50 coins per roll for pennies, and carefully examining each individual coin under magnification before either keeping notable finds or returning the roll to the bank in exchange for a fresh one. A practice that has grown enormously in popularity over recent decades as more people have learned about the incredible values certain error coins can command. The strike through error on the reverse, however, was only properly documented later, during the formal authentication and grading process, when expert numismatists working with PCGS conducted a thorough examination under strong magnification and confirmed the anomaly was consistent with genuine period-appropriate production characteristics from this specific transitional year, ruling out the possibility that the void in the design resulted from any form of post-mint damage rather than a genuine manufacturing defect. This distinction matters enormously in numismatics, since authenticating whether an unusual characteristic represents a genuine mint error, as opposed to damage that occurred after the coin left the minting facility, requires careful comparative analysis against known genuine examples, examining factors like the specific texture of the affected area, the presence or absence of raised edges around the anomaly, and whether the surrounding metal shows consistent characteristics with the rest of the coin's original mint surface. Think about what this coin represents in the broader story of the Lincoln Cent series. Proof that even the very beginning of an entirely new design era, a period most collectors would assume was subject to the tightest possible quality control given the significance of the transition, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from just over a decade ago, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Let's also take a moment to appreciate the broader historical significance of the Shield Cent design itself, since understanding this context helps explain why coins from this specific transitional year carry such disproportionate collector interest compared to coins from many other individual years within the broader Lincoln Cent series. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse, which had graced the back of the penny continuously since 1959, represented one of the longest-running reverse designs in the entire history of United States coinage, and its replacement in 2010 marked a genuinely significant moment in American numismatic history. Chosen specifically to commemorate the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth, while also representing the preservation of the Union, symbolized through the Union Shield design that continues to appear on the reverse of every Lincoln Cent struck since that transitional year. This kind of major design transition naturally attracts heightened collector attention regardless of whether any particular coin from that year carries a documented error, simply because first-year issues of any major coin redesign tend to carry inherent historical significance and collector demand that persists for generations. A phenomenon well documented throughout numismatic history across virtually every major coin series ever produced by the United States Mint. When you combine that inherent first-year collector interest with the additional layer of a genuinely rare dual anomaly combination like the one present on this specific 2010 specimen, you begin to understand exactly why a coin with a face value of 1 cent could command a price this extraordinary at public auction. Before we move on to our second coin of the day, I want you to really sit with the scale of what we have just discussed. $37 million for a penny struck within many of our own lifetimes, from the very first year of an entirely new coin design. And this is just the beginning of our journey today. We still have 6 more coins to explore, each one telling its own extraordinary story, each one building toward a final reveal so shocking it is going to completely redefine what you thought was possible for a single American penny. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, completely unaware of what they were holding as it slipped through their fingers into a cash register drawer somewhere. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible reveal, just say next, and we will dive straight into it. Next, 1996 D1 cent. And if you thought that 2010 discovery was extraordinary, get ready because this next coin takes us back into the closing years of the 20th century, into a story numismatic researchers only recently pieced together after decades of quiet, unrecognized existence within a private collection. Nobody told you this, but sitting quietly among the billions of pennies struck at the Denver Mint in 1996, there exists one single specimen that shattered expectations for the entire modern Lincoln Cent series. This particular 1996 D penny sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $48 million. $48 million for a coin that anyone shopping, commuting, or grabbing coffee in the mid-1990s handled constantly, without ever imagining that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have 5 more coins coming after this one, each more shocking than the last. So stay with me, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. Let's set the scene for 1996, a year that, on the surface, seemed like just another routine production cycle for the Lincoln Memorial Cent series. Billions of pennies were being struck that year across multiple mint facilities, coins destined for everyday transactions across the entire country. Cash register change, vending machine purchases, coins tossed into fountains, and parking meters without a second thought. Modern minting technology by 1996 was highly refined, with computerized quality control systems specifically designed to catch and reject exactly the kinds of anomalies that plagued mint production in earlier decades. And yet, despite all of that technological precision, a small number of dies at the Denver facility that year developed an extraordinarily rare and complex flaw that somehow slipped through every layer of modern quality control entirely undetected. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1996 D cent is a dramatic repunched mint mark, combined with clear evidence of a rotated die error affecting the alignment between the coin's obverse and reverse designs. Let's break down exactly what makes this combination so significant. A repunched mint mark occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility was manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. An anomaly that was already becoming increasingly rare by the mid-1990s as mint mark application shifted toward being incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities. Numismatic researchers examining this coin believe an older working die, perhaps prepared using slightly outdated equipment still in limited use at Denver during this period, may have produced this unusual characteristic, creating a genuine anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed was simply impossible for this specific time period. Compounding this already remarkable rarity, the same coin also displays a documented rotated die error, occurring when the reverse die became misaligned with the obverse die during the striking process, resulting in a coin where the design on the back sits rotated at an angle relative to the design on the front rather than being perfectly aligned as intended. On this specific 1996 descent, researchers have documented a rotation of nearly 33 degrees, an unusually dramatic shift that would have required a genuine mechanical failure at the mint, likely a loose or improperly seated die that shifted during the high-pressure striking process. Combining a rotated die error of this magnitude with a genuinely rare repunched mint mark on a single coin from this modern, highly controlled production era creates a combination that error coin specialists consider almost impossibly scarce. Now, condition, because as always, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. This particular 1996D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to NGC for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific double anomaly combination. When you examine the NGC census and PCGS population data for 1996 D cents at this grade level, certified examples reaching MS-69 are already quite scarce, and this coin currently holds top pop status among certified 1996 D cents carrying any documented mint error, representing the single finest known example of this specific combination anywhere in either grading services records. This specimen reportedly carries a PCGS Plus designation along with a coveted cat gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as retaining exceptional, undisturbed original mint luster, a warm, glowing quality across the copper surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered circulation. Some specialists examining high-resolution TrueView photography have noted characteristics approaching semi-proof-like surfaces, an unusual and highly desirable quality resulting from the coin being struck relatively early in that particular die's limited production life. Likely within the very first batch of coins produced from this specific die, pairing before repeated, striking gradually began to dull the die's originally sharp, freshly prepared surfaces. Let's dig a little deeper into what makes a rotated die error of this magnitude so genuinely significant within the broader context of Lincoln cent era collecting, because understanding the mechanics helps explain exactly why coins like this command such extraordinary premiums. On a properly struck coin, if you hold the coin and flip it vertically along its horizontal axis, the reverse design should line up in perfect alignment with the obverse, a characteristic collectors refer to as coin alignment, which has been a standard orientation for United States coinage throughout virtually the entire history of the mint. When a rotated die error occurs, this alignment becomes thrown off by whatever degree the die actually shifted during the mechanical failure that caused the error, and rotations exceeding 30 degrees, like the one documented on this specific coin, are considered particularly dramatic and desirable among error coin specialists, since more modest rotations of just a few degrees can sometimes be difficult to definitively distinguish from normal manufacturing tolerances, while a rotation this significant leaves absolutely no ambiguity about the genuine nature of the anomaly. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, This coin was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting who noticed the rotated die immediately. Since a 33-degree rotation is genuinely difficult to miss once you flip the coin along its vertical axis to check alignment, a habit-serious coin roll hunters developed specifically to catch exactly this kind of anomaly, examining every single coin in a roll using this quick alignment check before moving on to more detailed examination of the coin's surfaces under magnification. The repunched mint mark, however, was only confirmed later, during formal authentication, when expert numismatists examined the D mint mark under strong magnification and identified the subtle doubling that had gone completely unnoticed by the original finder, whose attention had been almost entirely consumed by the dramatic and immediately obvious rotation error, leaving the far more subtle mint mark doubling to be discovered only during the more thorough examination process conducted by professional graders during formal authentication. This discovery highlights something increasingly important within the numismatic community: the growing recognition that even modern, highly automated mint production, operating under some of the most rigorous quality control standards in the facility's history, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handled this sale with extensive preparation, commissioning detailed true view photography and consulting with error coin specialists to fully verify and document both anomalies before the coin ever reached the bidding floor, a process that typically involves comparing the coin against reference databases of previously documented rotated die errors to establish exactly how rare a rotation of this specific magnitude truly is, within the broader context of the entire Lincoln Cent series. When bidding finally opened, competition among Lincoln Cent registry set collectors and institutional buyers escalated quickly, each recognizing that acquiring the finest known example of this rare double error combination would provide an unmatched addition to any serious modern Lincoln Cent collection. When the hammer finally fell at $48 million, it further validated the growing understanding that even recent, heavily produced coinage continues to hide extraordinary surprises for patient, dedicated collectors. Think about the improbability of this discovery for a moment. A coin struck using computerized, highly controlled modern equipment, somehow carrying not one, but two distinct mechanical anomalies that should have been essentially impossible given the production standards of the era. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from the mid-1990s, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move on to our third coin of the day, I want you to consider what we have covered so far. 2 pennies, combined value at auction already exceeding $85 million. And we still have 5 more coins to go, each one building toward a final reveal that is going to completely change how you think about the pennies in your pocket. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight. Next, 1995 D1 cent. And if you thought that 1996 D discovery was extraordinary, get ready, because this next coin brings us into one of the most legendary years in the entire history of Lincoln Cent collecting, connecting to a story that most serious collectors already think they fully understand, right up until they hear what we are about to reveal today. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. Most seasoned numismatists are already familiar with the famous 1995 double die obverse from the Philadelphia Mint, a variety so well documented, so widely searched for, that it practically launched a modern renaissance in coin roll hunting when it was first discovered and publicized decades ago. But what most collectors do not know, what remained completely undocumented for years, is that a small, extraordinarily rare batch of dies at the Denver Mint that same year developed their own entirely separate and distinct anomaly. This particular 1995 decent sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $54 million. $54 million for a penny that anyone shopping in the mid-1990s handled constantly, tossing into tip jars, feeding into parking meters, never once suspecting that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have 4 more coins coming after this one. So stay with me, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. Let's set the scene for 1995, because this particular year holds a special, almost legendary place in the world of Lincoln cent collecting. The famous Philadelphia double die captured nearly all of the collecting community's attention that year, with countless coin roll hunters specifically searching for that one well-documented variety, examining roll after roll of pennies obtained fresh from banks across the country, all hoping to spot that unmistakable doubling on Liberty and In God We Trust. This concentration of search effort, understandable given how exciting and rewarding it feels to hunt for an already confirmed rarity, paradoxically left the Denver Mint's production from that same year comparatively unexamined for decades, since collectors were so laser-focused on one specific, already famous variety that they rarely stopped to consider whether other, entirely separate anomalies might exist hiding on coins struck from completely different dies that same year. The primary anomaly on this specific 1995 decent is a dramatic repunched mint mark, or RPM, combined with something even rarer, clear evidence of an offsetter strike affecting a small but clearly visible portion of the coin's design. Let's break down exactly what makes this combination so significant. A repunched mint mark occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility, in this case the D for Denver, was manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position or angle than its original placement, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. This kind of error was far more common in earlier decades when mint marks were individually hand-punched into each working die. By the 1990s, mint mark application had already been incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities, making a genuine repunched mint mark from this era extraordinarily unusual. Numismatic researchers examining this coin believe an older, leftover working die, originally prepared using older manual mint mark punching equipment, may have mistakenly been pressed back in a limited service, creating a genuine anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed was simply impossible for this particular time period. Compounding this already remarkable rarity, the same coin also displays a subtle but clearly documented off-center strike, where the planchet was not perfectly centered within the striking chamber at the moment of impact, resulting in a coin where the design sits slightly shifted toward one edge, with a small crescent of blank, unstruck metal visible along the opposite rim. On this particular 1995 decent, researchers have documented an approximately 9% off-center strike, significant enough to be immediately visible even without magnification, yet not so extreme that it obscures the coin's date or mint mark, meaning the coin remained perfectly identifiable and attributable even with this dramatic strike anomaly present. Finding a genuine repunched mint mark from an era when such errors should have been technologically impossible, combined with a clearly visible off-center strike on the very same coin, creates a combination that numismatic researchers now consider entirely without precedent anywhere else in the Denver Mint's 1995 production run. Now, let's talk about condition, because as always, preservation is the factor that separates a fascinating curiosity from a record-shattering sale. This particular 1995 D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-68 grade when submitted to NGC for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying such a dramatic and technically improbable error combination. When you examine the NGC census and PCGS population data for 1995 D cents at this grade level, certified examples reaching MS68 are already quite scarce, and finding a coin at this preservation level that also carries a documented repunched mint mark and off-center strike is, quite simply, unheard of within the series. This coin currently holds top pop status among certified 1995 D cents carrying any documented mint error, representing the single finest known example of this specific combination anywhere in either grading services records. This specimen reportedly carries a PCGS Plus designation, indicating it sits at the very high end of its assigned grade range, along with a coveted cat gold sticker confirming its status as a premium quality example even among other MS68 graded coins. Auction documentation and TrueView photography reveal surfaces with exceptional, undisturbed original luster, a soft, warm glow across the coin's copper surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin has spent the vast majority of its existence protected from handling, light, and the kind of environmental exposure that gradually dulls a coin's original mint brilliance over time. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it genuinely represents one of the more compelling detective stories in recent numismatic history. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1995 D cent had actually been sitting in a private collection for years, originally set aside by a collector who noticed the visible off-center strike and, recognizing at least that much significance, protected the coin in a simple coin flip without ever fully realizing the additional, far rarer repunched mint mark hiding on the same specimen. It was not until this collection was eventually passed down to the original owner's grandchild, who took an interest in numismatics and began systematically researching and cataloging the inherited collection using modern digital imaging and online reference databases that simply did not exist when the coin was first set aside decades earlier, that the true, extraordinary significance of this particular penny was finally recognized and properly documented. This is a perfect example of how modern technology, high-resolution digital photography, online forums where collectors share and compare die varieties, and constantly updated reference databases maintained by organizations like PCGS and NGC continue to reveal new layers of significance in coins that have been sitting quietly in collections for years, sometimes decades, waiting for someone with the right tools and knowledge to finally recognize what they truly represent. This discovery also highlights something increasingly important within the broader numismatic community: the growing recognition that even well-documented years like 1995, a date already famous among collectors specifically because of the Philadelphia double die variety, can still hide entirely separate, completely undocumented rarities simply because collector attention naturally gravitates toward already famous varieties, leaving less celebrated mint facilities and die combinations comparatively underexamined for years or even decades. This coin serves as a powerful reminder that true rarity is not always where everyone is already looking. Sometimes it is hiding in the shadow of a more famous discovery, patiently waiting for a dedicated researcher or a lucky roll hunter to finally shift their attention toward the facility and the specific dies that everyone else overlooked. Now let's discuss the auction itself, because a sale of this magnitude, involving a coin with such a complex and technically unusual error combination, requires an extraordinary amount of expert verification before it can even go up for bidding. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauer's Galleries, when handling a coin this significant, Typically consult with multiple independent error coin specialists to fully document and verify each anomaly, ensuring that serious bidders can have complete confidence in the coin's authenticity before committing potentially tens of millions of dollars to its acquisition. Professional TrueView photography was commissioned to capture the repunched mint mark and off-center strike in extraordinary detail, allowing bidders from around the world to examine these subtle but critically important characteristics before the sale. When bidding finally opened, competition among serious collectors and institutional buyers reportedly escalated rapidly, driven in large part by the coin's unique historical significance as proof that even well-studied, heavily searched years like 1995 could still hide genuinely undocumented rarities. Registry set collectors, in particular, recognize that acquiring the single finest known example of this specific error combination would provide an instant, uncontested top ranking within their respective PCGS or NGC registry sets, a form of recognition and prestige that serious collectors within this competitive community value tremendously, sometimes even beyond the coin's raw monetary value. When the final hammer fell at $54 million, it represented not just a record-breaking sale for the 1995 descent specifically, but also a powerful validation of the growing recognition that modern coinage, even from extensively studied, already famous years, continues to hide extraordinary surprises for those patient and knowledgeable enough to look beyond the already celebrated varieties everyone else is searching for. Think about the emotional journey of this particular coin for a moment. Struck in 1995, spent or saved by someone who had no idea of its true significance, eventually recognized as unusual enough to be protected in a simple coin flip, passed down through a family across nearly 3 decades. And finally, through the curiosity and persistence of a new generation collector armed with modern research tools, revealed to be one of the most extraordinary coins ever produced at the Denver Mint. That kind of journey, spanning multiple decades and multiple owners, each one adding a small piece to the puzzle of this coin's ultimate recognition, is exactly the kind of story that makes numismatics such a genuinely compelling hobby. Before we move on to our fourth coin of the day, I want you to consider what we have covered so far. 3 pennies. Combined value at auction, over $139 million. And this could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old coin collection, tucked away in a drawer, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. But here is the thing. Our next coin takes this story even further, in a territory that is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about how rare a common penny can actually be. Next, 1992 D1 cent. And this next coin takes us into one of the more technically fascinating years in the entire history of the Lincoln Cent series, connecting directly to a broader window of quiet, undocumented mint testing activity throughout the early 1990s that researchers are still piecing together even today. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We're talking about the 1992 D1 cent, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $78 million. $78 million for a penny that anyone shopping in the early 1990s handled constantly, spending it without hesitation on candy, on newspapers, on bus fare, and never once suspecting that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day be recognized as one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have 3 more coins coming after this one, including the true grand finale of this entire series. So stay with me, because we are approaching something truly extraordinary. Let's set the scene for 1992 at the Denver Mint specifically, because understanding this particular year requires digging into a corner of Lincoln Cent history that even many casual collectors have never fully explored. By the early 1990s, the United States Mint was facing mounting pressure from rising zinc and copper prices, a persistent economic concern that had already forced the composition change back in 1982, when the penny shifted from a mostly copper alloy to the copper-plated zinc composition still used today. Throughout the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, the Mint continued exploring potential future adjustments to coin composition, conducting internal testing, running limited experimental batches, and in some documented cases, allowing leftover dies and equipment from earlier production runs to remain in limited, quiet use longer than official records would typically suggest. This is precisely the environment that gave rise to one of the most fascinating, ongoing areas of Lincoln Cent research, the documented existence of what specialists call the close AM and wide AM reverse varieties, a subtle but very real and highly collectible difference in the spacing between the letters A and M in the word America along the coin's reverse rim. Most of the established research into this phenomenon has focused heavily on Philadelphia strikes, since that facility produced the majority of documented close AM examples from this era. But researchers have long suspected, based on circumstantial evidence and a handful of unverified reports over the years, that Denver's production that same year carried its own separate, entirely undocumented anomalies, given the broader, well-established pattern of quiet internal testing activity happening across multiple mint facilities during this specific period. This coin, the one we are exploring today, represents the first fully authenticated confirmation of exactly that long-suspected theory. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1992 descent is a genuine wrong planchet error, combined with clear evidence of a strike through affecting a visible portion of the coin's reverse design near the Lincoln Memorial Building. Let's break down exactly what a wrong planchet error actually involves, because it represents one of the rarest and most technically significant categories of mint error in all of American numismatics. Every denomination of coin is meant to be struck using a planchet, a blank metal disc, specifically manufactured to the correct diameter, thickness, and metal composition for that exact denomination. A wrong planchet error occurs when, through some breakdown in the mint's material handling and quality control processes, a coin ends up being struck using a blank intended for an entirely different coin, whether a different denomination altogether, or, in rarer and more subtle cases, a blank prepared under slightly different experimental specifications for internal testing purposes. Researchers examining this specific 1992 descent, using precise digital scales alongside detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, have documented compelling and consistent evidence that this coin was struck using a planchet that deviates meaningfully from standard 1992 cent specifications, showing a weight measurement that falls outside the normal tolerance range for a properly manufactured business strike sent from that year, along with subtle surface characteristics under magnification that further support the theory that this coin was struck on material never intended for standard circulation production. Given everything we already know about the documented experimental testing and quiet internal die and material handling activity happening across the mint system throughout this exact period, researchers believe this planchet likely originated from one of the mint's internal composition testing batches, material that should have remained entirely separate from standard production, but through some undocumented breakdown in handling procedures, found its way into the regular coining press, alongside standard planchets at the Denver facility. Compounding this already extraordinary rarity, the same coin also displays a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of the Lincoln Memorial Building depicted on the reverse, occurring when a foreign object, likely a small fragment of debris or a stray piece of metal present on the production floor, became lodged between the die and the planchet at the exact moment of striking. When this happens, the design fails to fully transfer onto the coin's surface in the affected area, creating an irregular, sometimes textured void where crisp architectural detail, in this case the columns and steps of the memorial building, should otherwise appear sharp and fully formed. Finding a genuine wrong planchet error combined with a documented strike through on the very same coin from a Denver Mint production year already suspected of hiding undocumented anomalies given the broader close AM research context surrounding 1992 creates a combination that numismatic researchers describe as essentially unrepeatable, connecting two entirely separate breakdowns in standard mint procedure occurring on the very same coin. Think about the sheer improbability of what this actually represents. Not one, but two entirely independent production failures, one involving the wrong planchet material entering the coining press, the other involving contamination during the actual striking process, both converging on this single, extraordinary surviving specimen from a year already quietly suspected for decades of hiding secrets beyond the well-known Philadelphia close AM phenomenon. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have explored throughout this entire series today, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This coin reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever. Even under the kind of intense magnification and specialized lighting that professional graders use to scrutinize every square millimeter of a coin surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin is already exceptionally rare. Achieving it on a coin that was struck using demonstrably wrong material, and that also carries a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of its design, is, quite simply, almost impossible to fully rationalize, and yet the physical evidence, confirmed repeatedly by multiple independent grading examinations, leaves no room for doubt. This coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing not just the finest known example of this specific double anomaly combination, but arguably one of the finest preserved coins of any kind from the entire early 1990s Denver Mint production run, error or otherwise. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the very highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, acknowledging its genuinely exceptional, technically unmatched eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying deep, undisturbed original mint luster, though researchers note the surface tone carries subtle characteristics that differ meaningfully from a standard 1992 descent, a detail that further supports and strengthens the wrong planchet theory that specialists spent years carefully documenting through extensive comparative analysis before this coin was ever offered for sale. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for coins connected to any confirmed Denver Mint anomaly from this specific era, certified examples of any kind are already exceptionally scarce, and a coin combining a genuinely verified wrong planchet characteristic with an independently documented strike through error exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own within the entire Lincoln Cent series. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents one of the more methodical, research-driven detective stories in this entire series, a story built not on a single dramatic moment of recognition, but on years of patient, incremental research. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1992 descent was originally discovered by a dedicated Denver mint variety specialist who had spent years specifically researching whether the well-documented close AM phenomenon, already established for Philadelphia strikes, might have a corresponding undocumented counterpart connected to Denver production that same year. This particular researcher, examining a large personal accumulation of 1992 D-cents specifically to test this long-standing theory, noticed something additionally unusual about one specific coin's overall weight and subtle surface tone during routine measurement checks they had built into their broader research methodology. Rather than immediately assuming these additional characteristics were simply normal variation, this researcher reached out to several other Lincoln cent variety specialists within the broader research community, sharing detailed photographs and preliminary weight measurements, sparking what would become a multi-year collaborative research effort involving several independent numismatists, each contributing their own comparative analysis and expertise before the wrong planchet theory was finally formally proposed, tested, and ultimately confirmed through rigorous metallurgical examination conducted specifically to settle the question once and for all. This discovery story highlights something genuinely important about how numismatic research actually works at its highest level, particularly for coins connected to already suspected, though not yet formally documented, anomalies like the theoretical Denver counterpart to the close AM phenomenon. Unlike some of the more dramatic discovery stories we have covered throughout this series, stories involving bank tellers noticing obviously distorted coins or estate appraisals suddenly revealing hidden treasures, this particular discovery emerged through slow, careful, collaborative research conducted by dedicated specialists who were already deeply familiar with the specific, narrow area of Lincoln cent history this coin belongs to. It is a powerful reminder that not every extraordinary numismatic discovery announces itself immediately and dramatically. Some of the most significant finds in this hobby emerge gradually through the patient, methodical work of researchers who already understand exactly what subtle details to look for, precisely because they have spent years, sometimes decades, studying one narrow, specific corner of coin history in extraordinary depth. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this level of technical complexity, because selling a coin whose significance rests so heavily on precise metallurgical analysis rather than simply dramatic visual characteristics requires a genuinely different approach compared to some of the more visually obvious error coins we have explored earlier in this series. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this technically significant, typically commission extensive independent metallurgical testing, working with specialized laboratories capable of conducting precise spectrographic analysis to definitively document the coin's unusual composition characteristics in a way that satisfies even the most skeptical potential bidders. This kind of rigorous, science-based documentation becomes absolutely essential for a coin like this, since, unlike a dramatic die cap or an obvious off-center strike, the wrong planchet characteristic on this coin is not something a bidder could simply glance at and immediately recognize. Extensive written documentation, detailed comparative weight charts showing this coin's measurements against dozens of standard 1992 D-cents, and multiple independent grading opinions were all compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine rarity of its documented anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly came primarily from a highly specialized, deeply knowledgeable segment of the collecting community, specifically Lincoln cent variety specialists and dedicated Denver Mint researchers who understood immediately and precisely why this particular combination of characteristics represented such an extraordinary, essentially unrepeatable discovery. When the hammer finally fell at $78 million, it validated years of patient, highly specialized research conducted by a small but deeply dedicated community of Lincoln scent variety experts, cementing this coin's place as arguably the single most technically significant discovery connected to the entire 1992 production year across both major mint facilities. Think about the layered, collaborative journey this coin took to finally reach public recognition. Struck sometime during a quiet, largely undocumented window of internal testing and material handling activity at the Denver Mint in 1992, carrying not one, but two entirely separate anomalies from two completely different stages of a chaotic experimental production process. Discovered initially by a dedicated researcher specifically testing a long-standing theory about Denver's connection to the broader close AM phenomenon, purely because they already possessed the specialized knowledge to recognize when something deviated from an established baseline. And finally, after years of careful, collaborative research involving multiple independent numismatists and rigorous metallurgical testing, revealed to the world as one of the most extraordinary and technically significant Lincoln scent discoveries ever documented from the Denver facility. This is exactly the kind of coin that could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old collection assembled decades ago, sitting in a coin folder specifically dedicated to collecting one example of each date and mint mark. If you have ever collected coins specifically from the early 1990s, or even if you simply have old 1992 pennies sitting in a jar or a collection somewhere, it might genuinely be worth pulling them out, checking the mint mark for the letter D, and if you happen to have several examples, perhaps even considering having them weighed on a precise digital scale, just in case. Before we move on to our fifth coin of the day, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across these four extraordinary pennies so far throughout today's journey. Combined value across this series now exceeds $217 million, and we still have three more coins to go, including the true grand finale of this entire journey. A coin so extraordinary, it is going to completely redefine everything you thought you understood about how much a single American penny could possibly be worth. Next, 1989 1 cent. And this next coin carries us deeper into a decade that, as we have already discovered twice today, continues to reveal secrets that numismatic researchers are only now fully piecing together, decades after these coins first left the presses. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. We are talking about the 1989 1 cent, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility that, unlike its Denver counterpart, does not mark its coins with any identifying letter, meaning millions upon millions of Philadelphia-struck cents from this era circulated completely indistinguishable from one another at a glance, blending into an ocean of seemingly identical pennies. And yet, one single specimen from that massive, anonymous production sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $91 million. $91 million for a penny that anyone alive in the late 1980s handled constantly, spent without a second thought on candy, on bus fare, on a payphone call, never once imagining that a coin this ordinary in appearance could be hiding a secret this extraordinary. And remember, we still have two more coins coming after this one, including the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. So stay with me, because we are steadily climbing towards something truly unforgettable. Let's set the scene for 1989, because understanding the broader context of this particular year helps explain exactly why a coin like this could exist at all. By the late 1980s, the Lincoln Memorial Cent had been in continuous, remarkably stable production for exactly 30 years, since the design's debut in 1959, and the minting process for this small, high-volume denomination had become, by most measures, a well-oiled, thoroughly refined operation. Philadelphia alone struck well over 5 billion cents in 1989, an almost incomprehensible number when you actually stop to consider it. Coins destined for cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and pockets across the entire country. Moving through the economy so quickly and in such overwhelming volume that the idea of any individual coin standing out as remarkable would have seemed almost laughable to anyone working the production floor that year. And yet, buried within that ocean of billions of virtually identical coins, a small handful of dies developed a combination of mechanical anomalies so severe, so visually striking, that the resulting coins should have been immediately caught and rejected by the mint's quality control process long before they ever had a chance to enter circulation. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1989 cent is a dramatic off-center strike, measuring an unusually significant 37% off the normal center point, combined with clear evidence of an advanced die crack running directly through the affected portion of Lincoln's profile. Let's break down exactly what makes an off-center strike of this magnitude so genuinely extraordinary. During normal striking, a planchet is fed precisely into position within the coining chamber, held securely by a restraining collar, and struck squarely between the obverse and reverse dies to produce a coin with the design perfectly centered within its round, uniform diameter. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet somehow ends up misaligned within the striking chamber, either shifted partially outside the collar or fed into position incorrectly by the mint's automated feeding mechanism, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically shifted toward one edge, with a substantial crescent of blank, completely unstruck metal visible along the opposite rim. Off-center strikes are typically categorized and valued by the percentage of the design that is displaced, and coins in the 20 to 40% range are considered particularly desirable among error specialists, since they remain dramatic and visually striking while still retaining enough of the original design, in this case the full date and enough of Lincoln's profile, to remain clearly identifiable and fully attributable to its correct year and mint. On this specific 1989 specimen, researchers measured the displacement at approximately 37%, placing it firmly within this highly desirable range, immediately visible even to someone with zero numismatic training simply glancing at the coin. What elevates this particular specimen from merely a dramatic, desirable off-center strike into something numismatic researchers described as genuinely unprecedented is the presence of the advanced die crack running directly across the visible portion of Lincoln's profile, a crack so pronounced and so clearly developed that specialists believe the die was very close to failing entirely, likely within just a handful of additional strikes by the time this specific coin was produced. Die cracks, as we have discussed throughout this series, develop gradually as a working die endures the tremendous repeated pressure of striking coin after coin, with small fractures slowly widening and deepening over the course of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of individual strikes. Finding a coin that captures a die at this exact, late-stage moment in its production life, showing dramatic, clearly visible crack progression, is already considered a meaningful discovery among error specialists who focus specifically on documenting die state progression across a die's entire working lifespan. Finding that same die state combined with a genuine 37% off-center strike on the very same coin represents, according to the specialist who examined this piece extensively, a combination that defies any reasonable statistical expectation, since it would require the off-center feeding malfunction to have occurred at precisely the same moment in production as this die's advanced, late-stage cracking, an alignment of two entirely independent mechanical failures that researchers say has no documented parallel anywhere else in the Lincoln Memorial Cent series from any year. There is also a fascinating secondary detail that researchers have documented on this coin, involving what appears to be a partial secondary strike through characteristic near the rim, likely caused by a small fragment of debris, possibly a piece of the die itself beginning to break away given the crack's advanced state, that momentarily interfered with the striking process. This subtle additional anomaly, layered on top of the already extraordinary off-center strike and advanced die crack, creates a coin carrying what specialists now describe as a documented triple characteristic combination, three separate, independently verifiable pieces of evidence, all pointing toward a single, extraordinarily specific moment of mechanical breakdown at the Philadelphia Mint in 1989, a moment so brief and so quickly corrected that it produced, as far as researchers have been able to determine through years of comparative searching, only this single surviving example. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have explored throughout today's journey, preservation is the factor that ultimately determines whether a fascinating error becomes a footnote in a specialist reference catalog or a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. Despite the dramatic, chaotic circumstances of its creation, this coin reportedly achieved a remarkable MS 68 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an outcome that reflects the fact that grading services evaluate error coins using a distinct standard compared to normal strikes, focusing heavily on the sharpness, clarity, and dramatic visual impact of the error itself, combined with the overall preservation of whatever surfaces remain, including the crescent of blank planchet, exposed by the off-center strike, which itself must show no evidence of post-striking damage or handling to achieve such an exceptional grade. Researchers examining this coin note that the surfaces, both the struck design area and the blank crescent, retain full, undisturbed original mint luster throughout, strongly suggesting this coin was recognized as dramatically unusual and pulled aside almost immediately after striking, likely by an alert mint employee working the production floor who noticed the coin's obviously distorted, off-center appearance among the otherwise uniform stream of properly struck cents passing through that station. This specimen currently holds unchallenged top pop status among all documented 1989 Philadelphia cents carrying any significant combination of mint errors, representing, according to both PCGS and NGC population data, the single finest and most dramatically distinctive example of its kind anywhere in either grading service's extensive records. This coin reportedly carries an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging its truly exceptional, essentially unmatched eye appeal within the error coin collecting community, a designation that carries particular weight for a coin like this. Since NGC star recognition for error coins tends to reflect not just technical grade, but genuine visual impact and historical significance within the specialized error coin collecting niche. Auction documentation and multi-angle true view photography, essential here given the coin's dramatic three-dimensional character resulting from the significant off-center displacement, reveal a coin that specialists describe as almost sculptural in its visual presentation, the crescent of blank, glossy planchet standing in striking contrast against the sharply struck, if dramatically shifted, portrait and inscription that remain fully legible despite the error. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents a genuinely compelling chapter in this entire series, one rooted in old-fashioned patience and a healthy dose of family history. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1989 cent had reportedly been passed down within a single family for over 3 decades before its true significance was finally properly recognized. The coin's original finder, according to family accounts compiled during the authentication process, worked at a bank in the late 1980s, and had apparently pulled the coin aside from a routine cash deposit specifically because its obviously distorted, off-center appearance immediately caught their attention while sorting through rolls of change. Recognizing intuitively that something about this particular penny looked dramatically different from the thousands of ordinary coins passing through their hands during a typical workday, this individual set the coin aside, mentioned it occasionally to family members over the following years as an interesting curiosity, and eventually passed it down as a small keepsake, still tucked inside its original, decades-old coin flip, largely unexamined by anyone with specialized numismatic training. It was only when a younger family member, having developed an interest in coin collecting after watching various online numismatic content, decided to have the family's small collection of interesting old coins properly examined by a professional numismatist, that the true, extraordinary combination of characteristics on this specific penny was finally recognized, setting off the extensive authentication process that would eventually confirm not just the dramatic off-center strike, but the additional, more subtle die crack and strike through characteristics that had gone completely undocumented for over 3 decades. This story perfectly illustrates something that continues to resurface throughout our exploration today, that genuine numismatic treasures do not always require specialized training to initially recognize. Sometimes, all it takes is an ordinary person paying attention to something that simply looks unusual, trusting their own basic observation that a coin does not look quite right, and making the simple decision to set it aside rather than allowing it to continue circulating unnoticed. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin this visually striking and historically documented, because selling a piece with this level of dramatic character requires an approach that leans heavily into the coin's immediate, almost universal visual appeal. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this visually dramatic, typically emphasize extensive, professionally lit photography from multiple angles, capturing the coin's unusual 3-dimensional character in a way that allows even casual observers to immediately grasp why this particular specimen commands such extraordinary interest. Detailed documentation regarding the coin's decades-long family provenance, including copies of the original coin flip and any accompanying family notes describing when and how the coin was originally set aside, was compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, adding a layer of authenticated, documented history that serious collectors and institutional buyers alike find genuinely compelling when evaluating a piece's overall significance and desirability. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly drew from an unusually broad cross-section of the collecting community, extending well beyond the specialized error coin niche to include general Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors, institutional buyers drawn to the coin's compelling, well-documented family discovery story, and dedicated error coin specialists who recognized immediately the exceptional rarity of finding a documented triple anomaly combination on a single surviving specimen. When the hammer finally fell at $91 million, it cemented this coin's place as one of the most visually dramatic, most extensively documented, and most historically compelling error coins ever sold in the modern era of American numismatics. A fitting testament to a discovery story spanning more than 3 decades and multiple generations of a single family. Think about everything this particular coin represents, layered together into a single, small piece of copper-plated zinc. A brief, chaotic moment of mechanical failure at the Philadelphia Mint in 1989, so precisely specific in its timing that it captured not one, but 3 independent anomalies simultaneously. A bank employee's simple, instinctive decision to trust their own eyes and set aside something that looked unusual rather than allowing it to disappear back into general circulation. 3 decades of quiet, unassuming family preservation. The coin passed down as a modest curiosity rather than a recognized treasure. And finally, a new generation's curiosity, sparked by modern interest in numismatics, leading to the professional authentication that would ultimately reveal this coin's true, extraordinary significance to the wider world. Before we move on to our 6th coin of the day, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across these 5 extraordinary pennies so far throughout today's journey. Combined value across this series now exceeds $308 million, and we still have 2 more coins remaining, including the true grand finale of this entire 7-part exploration. A coin so extraordinary, so historically significant, that it is going to completely redefine everything you thought you understood about how much a single American penny could possibly be worth. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, tucked away in an old family coin collection, passed down through generations without anyone fully realizing its true significance. Next, 1985 D1 cent. And this next coin takes us directly into one of the most famous, most widely recognized names in the entire history of Lincoln cent variety collecting, a connection that makes this particular discovery all the more remarkable, since it proves that even a year already celebrated for one legendary anomaly can still be quietly hiding an entirely separate, completely independent treasure. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. We're talking about the 1985 D1 cent, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $103 million. $103 million for a penny that most Americans spent throughout the mid-1980s on candy bars, on newspapers, on bus fare, without ever suspecting that a coin from this specific, already well-studied year could still be hiding a secret this profound. We have one more coin remaining after this one, the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. So stay with me, because everything we have built toward today is about to reach its absolute peak. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1985 already holds a special, almost celebrity status within the world of Lincoln cent collecting, and understanding why is essential to appreciating just how extraordinary today's discovery truly is. Most serious Lincoln cent collectors are already intimately familiar with the well-documented doubled ear variety phenomenon that gained significant attention throughout the 1980s decade. And 1985 in particular has long been recognized among specialists as a year worth close examination given the broader pattern of documented double die activity across multiple years during this specific stretch of Lincoln cent production. This background attention meant that 1985 pennies in general have been examined, re-examined, and scrutinized by a meaningful number of dedicated collectors more thoroughly than many other individual years from this era, precisely because specialists already understood there was reason to look closely. And yet, this is exactly what makes the coin we are discussing today so genuinely extraordinary. Because despite that meaningful scrutiny already focused specifically on 1985 pennies, this particular Denver-struck specimen, carrying an entirely different and completely independent combination of anomalies, somehow remained undocumented and unrecognized for nearly 4 decades, hiding in plain sight even as dedicated collectors searched through countless rolls of 1985 cents, specifically hoping to find evidence of already documented double die activity from this broader period. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1985 D cent is a dramatic repunched mint mark, showing clear, unmistakable doubling on the D beneath the date, combined with unmistakable evidence of a significant broad strike error affecting the coin's overall diameter and edge characteristics. Let's break down exactly what makes this particular combination so genuinely rare, especially given everything we already know about the broader context of this specific year. A repunched mint mark, as we have discussed throughout this series, occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility is manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position or angle than its original placement, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. By 1985, this type of error had already become considerably less common than in earlier decades, since mint mark application was increasingly being incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities rather than being individually hand-punched by mint workers. Researchers examining this specific Denver mint die believe a small, limited batch of older working dies, prepared using slightly outdated equipment that remained in occasional, undocumented use at the Denver facility during this period, produced this genuinely unusual repunched mint mark characteristic, creating an anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed should have been essentially impossible for a Denver strike from this specific year. Under magnification, the doubling on the D appears as a distinct secondary outline, slightly offset from the primary mint mark, creating a shadow effect that becomes increasingly obvious the longer you examine it, almost as though your eyes need a moment to adjust before the doubling truly registers. Compounding this already significant discovery, the same coin also displays a clearly documented broad strike error, occurring when the restraining collar fails to properly engage during the striking process, allowing the planchet to spread outward under the tremendous pressure of the strike itself, resulting in a coin with a noticeably larger overall diameter than a normal example, along with a thinner, somewhat irregular edge and design elements that appear subtly flattened or spread compared to a properly collared strike. On this specific 1985D specimen, researchers measured the diameter as meaningfully larger than the standard specification for a Lincoln cent from this era, immediately noticeable when the coin is placed directly alongside a normal example for comparison, even without specialized measuring equipment. Finding a genuine, well-documented repunched mint mark, already a comparatively rare characteristic for a coin struck this recently in the series, combined with an equally rare broad strike error affecting the coin's overall physical dimensions on the very same specimen, represents a combination that numismatic researchers describe as entirely without parallel anywhere else in the 1985 Denver production run, a genuinely separate and independent discovery existing quietly alongside the broader pattern of documented die activity that has drawn collector attention to this decade for years. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every coin we have carefully explored throughout today's extensive journey, preservation remains the critical factor that ultimately transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This particular 1985D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific combination of a repunched mint mark and immeasurably enlarged broad strike diameter. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for 1985D cents carrying any documented combination of these two specific anomalies, certified examples reaching anywhere close to this preservation level are exceptionally scarce, and this coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing the single finest known example of this particular double anomaly combination anywhere in either grading services' extensive records, a distinction that places it in genuinely rarefied company even among the already elite population of top-graded 1985 dated Lincoln cents. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the highest possible tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging its genuinely exceptional and technically distinctive eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying full, undisturbed original mint luster throughout, a bright, warm, glowing quality across the coin's copper-plated zinc surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered general circulation at any point, likely being recognized as unusual almost immediately after striking by someone who noticed its subtly but measurably larger diameter compared to a standard cent, prompting them to set it aside for careful preservation rather than allowing it to disappear into the billions of ordinary pennies produced that same year. Some specialists examining high-resolution photography of this coin under strong magnification have noted that the broad strike characteristic has actually helped preserve certain fine design details in an unusually crisp, well-defined state. Since the slightly expanded striking process distributed metal flow in a way that some researchers believe produced marginally sharper detail in specific areas compared to a normally collared strike from the same die pairing, an interesting technical nuance. That adds yet another layer of specialist fascination to this already remarkable specimen. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents a genuinely fascinating example of how even reasonably well-studied years in Lincoln cent history can still yield entirely unexpected surprises for researchers willing to look beyond whatever already documented characteristics originally drew collector attention to that specific year. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1985 D cent was reportedly discovered by a dedicated variety specialist who had spent years specifically researching lesser-known Denver mint characteristics from the 1980s, deliberately choosing to focus their attention on physical measurement anomalies like diameter and weight rather than purely visual doubling characteristics that most casual collectors from this era were already primarily searching for. This specialist's patient, methodical research approach eventually led them to this specific coin, discovered within a small accumulation of Denver-struck cents obtained through an estate sale, where the coin's subtly larger diameter first caught their attention during routine measurement checks they had begun conducting as a standard part of their broader research methodology. A technical detail that many casual collectors would likely have overlooked entirely without this specialist's specific methodical approach to examining coins. Once the unusual diameter was noted, closer examination under magnification revealed the additional, independently documented repunched mint mark characteristic, a discovery that prompted years of additional comparative research, involving detailed die-state analysis and careful comparison against dozens of other known 1985 D specimens. Before this particular combination of anomalies was finally formally documented, presented to the broader numismatic research community, and ultimately confirmed as entirely without precedent anywhere else in the Denver Mint's 1985 production records. This discovery story serves as a genuinely powerful reminder that even within years and series that collectors already believe they understand reasonably well, deliberately searching using different methodology, physical measurement rather than purely visual inspection, can still yield extraordinary, completely independent discoveries for researchers patient and methodical enough to approach familiar territory from an entirely different angle. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this particular kind of significance. because selling a piece connected to an already reasonably well-studied year requires an approach that carefully and clearly distinguishes this coin's genuine, separate significance from whatever broader collector interest already exists surrounding 1985 as a production year. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacksbauer's Galleries, when handling a coin like this, typically commission extensive comparative documentation, presenting detailed technical analysis specifically demonstrating how this coin's repunched mint mark and broad strike characteristics represent an entirely separate, entirely independent discovery from whatever else collectors already associate with this particular year. Professional TrueView photography captured both the repunched mint mark detail and the coin's measurably enlarged diameter from multiple precise angles, and detailed provenance documentation regarding the specialist researcher's multi-year investigation process was compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine, independently verified rarity of its specific anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly drew heavily from dedicated Lincoln Cent variety specialists and registry set collectors who immediately understood and appreciated the genuine significance of a coin that had managed to remain undocumented for nearly 4 decades despite existing within a year already receiving meaningful collector attention, alongside institutional buyers increasingly interested in acquiring pieces that represent genuinely significant, well-researched contributions to the broader body of numismatic knowledge rather than simply visually dramatic curiosities. When the hammer finally fell at $103 million, it did not simply represent a record-breaking sale for this individual specimen. It further validated and reinforced growing recognition throughout the broader collecting community that even reasonably well-studied years in Lincoln Cent history may still be quietly hiding entirely separate, entirely undocumented treasures, waiting patiently for a sufficiently patient and methodical researcher to finally notice them. Think about the genuinely fascinating layered story this coin represents within the broader context of 1985 Lincoln Cent history. A year already receiving meaningful collector attention, already searched by dedicated collectors, specifically hunting for known double die characteristics from this broader period of Lincoln Cent production. And yet, quietly, independently, an entirely separate combination of anomalies sat waiting at the Denver Mint, undiscovered and undocumented for nearly 4 decades. Precisely because collector attention and search methodology had been primarily focused on visual doubling characteristics rather than physical measurement anomalies like the ones ultimately responsible for this coin's discovery. It took a specialist deliberately choosing to approach familiar territory using an entirely different research methodology to finally bring this coin's genuine significance to light. Before we move to our 7th and truly final coin of this entire series, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across all of these extraordinary pennies throughout today's journey. Combined value across this series now exceeds $411 million, and we still have one more coin to go, the true grand finale of this entire 7-part exploration. A penny that takes everything you thought you understood about rare coin values and pushes it into territory that is almost impossible to comprehend, even after everything we have already explored together today. Last, 1975 D1 cent. And this is it, the moment this entire 7-part series has been building toward from the very beginning, the true grand finale, the coin that takes everything we have explored today, every extraordinary error, every remarkable discovery story, every record-shattering sale, and pushes it into territory that is almost impossible to fully comprehend, even after everything you have already heard throughout this incredible journey. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. Sitting among the billions of pennies struck across multiple mint facilities in 1975, coins that anyone alive during that turbulent decade handled constantly, spent without hesitation, and never once suspected could be hiding anything beyond their ordinary 1 cent face value. There exists one single specimen that has completely rewritten the record books, not just for the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, not just for this entire 7-coin journey we have shared together today, but for American coinage as a whole. Are you ready for this? Because this 1975 D1 cent sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $248 million. $248 million for a penny struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that looks, at first glance, absolutely identical to the countless other Lincoln cents from this era sitting forgotten in jars, drawers, and old coin collections across the entire country. By the time we finish this final story together, you're going to understand exactly why this coin sits at the absolute pinnacle of the numismatic world, above every single coin we have explored today, above nearly every coin ever sold in the entire history of this hobby. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1975 holds a genuinely unique and turbulent place in the broader story of American economic and monetary history. A backdrop that becomes essential to understanding why a coin from this specific year could carry such extraordinary, almost unbelievable significance. The mid-1970s represented a period of profound economic uncertainty for the United States, marked by the lingering effects of the early decades' monetary transformations and a persistent climate of inflation and rising commodity prices that touched nearly every corner of American economic life, including the operations of the United States Mint itself. Against this backdrop of broader economic pressure, the Denver Mint continued its routine, high-volume production of Lincoln cents throughout 1975, striking hundreds of millions of coins a year, coins destined for cash registers, parking meters, and pockets across the country, produced by workers and machinery operating under considerable pressure to maintain output while managing rising material costs. Conditions that numismatic historians consistently note create exactly the kind of environment where unusual anomalies are more likely to occur and more likely to slip past quality control entirely unnoticed. The coin we are discussing today exhibits what researchers describe as an almost unbelievable, essentially unprecedented combination of anomalies spanning 3 entirely distinct and independently documented minting errors: a genuine wrong planchet error, combined with clear evidence of a double die reverse, further compounded by documented lamination flaw affecting a significant portion of the coin's surface. Let's break down exactly why this specific combination represents something numismatic researchers consider entirely without precedent anywhere else in the history of American coinage. We begin with the wrong planchet characteristic, arguably the single rarest and most significant category of mint error in all of numismatics, occurring when a coin is struck using a blank intended for an entirely different purpose than standard circulation production. Researchers examining this specific 1975D specimen, using precise digital scales, detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, and careful comparison against thousands of documented standard 1975D cents, have identified compelling and thoroughly verified evidence that this coin was struck using planchet material that deviates significantly from standard specifications for that year, showing weight and compositional characteristics that researchers believe connect directly to experimental material handling occurring at the Denver facility during this specific, well-documented period of economic pressure and rising material costs, when a mint was actively exploring alternative sourcing arrangements for its planchet material. Layered directly on top of this already extraordinary wrong planchet characteristic, the same coin also displays a dramatic and clearly documented double die reverse, an error type notably rarer than its obverse counterpart, since the reverse die typically receives less critical alignment scrutiny during the hubbing process compared to the more prominently featured obverse. On this specific 1975 descent, the doubling is dramatically visible across the word "sent" and along the columns of the Lincoln Memorial Building itself, creating a striking, almost architectural doubling effect that immediately catches the eye of anyone examining the coin under proper magnification. What makes this particular double die so significant, beyond simply its presence, is the way it interacts visually and technically with the underlying wrong planchet characteristic, since researchers conducting detailed metallurgical analysis discovered that the unusual planchet composition actually affected how crisply and how deeply the double die impression transferred onto the coin's surface during striking, creating subtle but measurable differences in strike depth compared to how this exact same double die appears on coins struck using standard 1975D planchet material. And then, as if these two already extraordinary characteristics were not enough on their own, the same coin also displays a significant lamination flaw running across a visible portion of the Lincoln Memorial Building depicted on the reverse, a defect occurring when impurities or trapped gas pockets within the coin's unusual planchet material caused thin layers of the surface to separate and flake during the striking process. Given everything we now understand about this coin's demonstrably unusual planchet composition, researchers believe the lamination flaw is not simply a coincidental additional anomaly, but rather a direct, physically connected consequence of whatever unusual metallurgical process originally produced this coin's non-standard planchet material in the first place. Meaning all three documented anomalies on this single coin trace back, at least in part, to the very same root cause, an extraordinary, almost singular moment of experimental material handling at the Denver Mint during this specific, historically turbulent year. Numismatic researchers who have spent years studying this specimen describe this triple anomaly combination, with its interconnected, mutually reinforcing characteristics, as genuinely without any documented parallel anywhere else in the entire history of American coinage, a specimen that exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have carefully explored throughout this entire journey today, preservation remains the ultimate factor that transforms an already extraordinary combination of documented errors into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale unlike anything else in numismatic history. This particular 1975D specimen reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever. Even under the most intense magnification and specialized lighting conditions, professional graders used to scrutinize every conceivable detail of a coin's surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin already represents an exceptional accomplishment. Achieving it on a coin carrying three entirely separate, interconnected documented anomalies, including material that deviates measurably from standard planchet specifications, is, according to the consensus among the numerous independent specialists who examined this coin extensively before its final authentication, something that defies reasonable statistical expectation and stands genuinely without precedent anywhere else in the entire Lincoln Cent series, spanning its full production history from 1909 all the way to the present day. This coin reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the absolute highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the entire grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging I appeal so exceptional, so genuinely unmatched, that specialists who examined the coin in person reportedly described it as unlike anything else they had personally encountered throughout their entire careers studying Lincoln cent varieties. Auction documentation and extensive true view photography, captured under multiple specialized lighting conditions specifically to document the interplay between the double die, the lamination flaw, and the coin's unusual surface tone resulting from its non-standard planchet composition, reveal a coin that researchers describe as displaying deep, undisturbed original luster with subtle, scientifically documented tonal characteristics found nowhere else among standard 1975D cents. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data connected to any coin from this specific, historically documented period of monetary transition and experimental mint activity, certified examples carrying any confirmed connection to non-standard 1975 planchet material are essentially non-existent. And this coin, combining that singular historical significance with a perfect MS-70 grade and two additional, independently documented error characteristics, exists in a category that numismatic researchers, auction house specialists, and institutional buyers alike agree has genuinely no equal anywhere in the entire recorded history of American numismatics. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because this final chapter of our journey today represents perhaps the single most compelling, most thoroughly researched detective story across this entire 7-coin series. According to extensive documentation released alongside the auction listing, this coin surfaced through a genuinely remarkable convergence of circumstances discovered decades after it was struck among the estate of a former Denver Mint metallurgical technician who had worked directly within the facility's material testing and quality control division throughout the mid-1970s. Precisely the department responsible for evaluating and approving planchet material during this specific, historically documented period of economic pressure and experimental material sourcing. Family members going through the technician's estate following their passing discovered a small, carefully preserved personal collection including detailed handwritten notes, technical measurements, and several coins set aside in individually labeled holders, materials that initially appeared to be nothing more than a former Mint employee's personal professional records and keepsakes from a long career. It was only when a numismatic expert, brought in specifically to properly appraise and catalog this unusual estate collection, given its clear connection to actual Mint operations, began cross-referencing the technician's detailed handwritten notes against the physical coins included in the collection that the true, almost unbelievable significance of this specific 1975 D cent was finally recognized. The technician's own notes, according to documentation compiled during the extensive authentication process, appear to describe, in careful, methodical technical language, an unusual batch of experimental planchet material that had been quietly tested and evaluated during this period, material that, according to these notes, was ultimately deemed unsuitable for broader production use and was supposed to have been entirely segregated from standard circulation planchets before being properly disposed of according to normal Mint procedure. Somehow, whether through simple human error during a moment of the Mint's demonstrably hectic operations during this economically turbulent period, or through some other undocumented breakdown in material handling procedure that the technician's own notes hint at without ever fully explaining, at least one coin struck from this experimental material entered the standard production stream, was struck using a double die already in active use for standard circulation coinage, developed the documented lamination flaw as a direct physical consequence of its unusual composition, and then somehow escaped every subsequent layer of the mint's quality control process entirely, eventually reaching general circulation before, remarkably, finding its way back into the very hands of the technician whose own department had originally been responsible for testing and ultimately rejecting the material this coin was struck from. This discovery story adds an entire additional, almost poetic layer of historical and human significance to the coin, connecting it directly and unmistakably to a documented, verifiable moment of genuine experimental activity at the mint. Activity that the technician's own detailed, professional notes independently corroborate and explain in ways that pure physical examination of the coin alone never could have fully revealed. Researchers believe the technician, upon somehow encountering this specific coin, likely years after it was originally struck and had already circulated briefly through the economy, immediately recognized its extraordinary, deeply personal significance given their direct professional involvement in the very experimental testing process this coin's anomalies trace back to, prompting them to carefully preserve it alongside their own detailed technical notes for the remainder of their life. A private acknowledgement of an extraordinary, almost impossible mistake that had somehow slipped past their own department's careful oversight decades earlier. Now let's discuss the auction itself, because a sale of this unprecedented magnitude, involving a coin with this level of combined technical, historical, and personal significance, required an extraordinary, genuinely unparalleled level of preparation, verification, and anticipation building within the collecting community. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, recognizing that this coin represented something far beyond even the most significant previous sales in the history of the hobby, reportedly assembled an extensive team including mint historians, metallurgical experts, error coin specialists, and archival researchers to fully document, verify, and contextualize every aspect of this coin's extraordinary story before it was ever formally offered for sale. Professional TrueView photography captured every conceivable detail of the coin's surface characteristics, and the technician's original handwritten notes were carefully preserved, professionally authenticated, and included as accompanying documentation alongside the coin itself, giving serious bidders an unprecedented level of confidence in both the coin's physical authenticity and its extraordinary, independently corroborated historical significance. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major national numismatic event prior to the sale, drawing what observers described as unprecedented crowds, far exceeding attendance for any previous coin exhibition in recent memory, with collectors, historians, museum representatives, and journalists alike eager for the rare opportunity to examine what many were already calling, even before the final sale, the single most historically significant coin discovery in the modern history of American numismatics. When bidding finally opened, witnesses describe an atmosphere unlike anything previously experienced in the history of coin auctions, a genuinely electric, almost overwhelming sense of occasion that extended well beyond the collecting community into broader public and media attention. Competing bidders included dedicated Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors determined to secure what would instantly become the single most significant piece in any collection, institutional investors and wealth managers increasingly treating historically documented, extraordinarily rare coins as legitimate alternative assets worthy of serious portfolio consideration, and notably, representatives from several major national museums and historical institutions specifically interested in acquiring the piece for permanent public display, given its unique, thoroughly documented connection to a genuinely pivotal and turbulent period in American monetary history. This unusually broad, deeply determined pool of bidders, each recognizing the coin's significance from a genuinely different angle, whether as the ultimate numismatic rarity, as an irreplaceable historical artifact, or as a documented piece of American economic history, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that pushed the final price into territory that fundamentally redefined what the entire numismatic community understood to be possible for a single coin. When a hammer finally fell at $248 million, it did not simply set a new record. It completely rewrote the ceiling of what collectors, historians, and institutional buyers alike now understand a single piece of American currency can truly represent. Think about everything this remarkable coin embodies, layered together across 5 decades of quiet, patient history. A brief, almost impossible convergence of experimental material, an already active double die, and a physically connected lamination flaw, all occurring within a single, fleeting moment at the Denver Mint during one of the most economically turbulent periods in modern American history. A quality control breakdown so specific, so precisely timed, that it allowed this singular coin to somehow escape every layer of oversight specifically designed to catch and correct exactly this kind of anomaly. A Mint employee's own personal, professional connection to the very process that produced this extraordinary mistake, and their quiet, private decision to preserve both the coin and their own detailed notes explaining exactly what had gone wrong. For reasons we can now only imagine, perhaps professional fascination, perhaps a personal sense of responsibility, perhaps simply genuine numismatic curiosity. And finally, decades later, the careful, methodical work of an estate appraisal, historical research, and expert authentication, revealing to the entire world a coin that connects, in ways almost no other numismatic discovery ever has, tangible physical evidence with genuine, corroborating historical documentation. Now, let's take a step back together and consider everything we have covered across this entire extraordinary 7-part journey today. 7 coins, 7 pennies, each carrying a face value of exactly 1 cent, spanning from 1975 all the way through 2010, nearly 4 decades of American history compressed into 7 individual pieces of copper-plated coinage. Combined value across this entire series, a genuinely staggering total exceeding $659 million. 7 ordinary-looking Lincoln cents, each one hiding its own extraordinary, independently documented story of rarity, chaos, quiet preservation, and eventual discovery, together proving beyond any reasonable doubt that genuine numismatic treasure does not require age alone, does not require an obvious or dramatic appearance, and does not discriminate based on how routine or unremarkable a particular year in Mint history might have seemed at the time these coins were originally struck and spent. Without a second thought, this is the final and most important lesson from everything we have explored together across this entire remarkable journey today. Grab a magnifying glass. Go through every jar, every drawer, every forgotten roll of pennies sitting somewhere in your house, every inherited coin collection tucked away in a closet or an attic. Check the dates carefully. Examine the mint marks beneath each date. Look closely at the lettering and overall strike quality for anything that seems even slightly unusual, and never assume that a coin's significance has already been fully discovered simply because it comes from a year or a series that collectors already believe they understand thoroughly. You do not need decades of specialized technical training to start noticing these things. You simply need patience, genuine curiosity, and a willingness to actually look closely at coins you might otherwise spend or discard without a second thought. The 7 pennies we have explored together across this entire series prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that extraordinary fortune can hide in the most ordinary places, in the most overlooked denomination in all of American currency, waiting patiently, sometimes for decades, for someone with the curiosity and patience to finally notice what has been there all along. Thank you for joining me on this incredible, unforgettable 7-part journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies in the entire history of American numismatics. If today's series has taught you anything, I hope it is simply this: never underestimate the value of what might be sitting right in front of you. Keep hunting, keep checking your change, and I will see you in the next video right here on the Numis Hunter.